Hey folks, I am back with the exact same shirt and with a hotter cup of tea because I am filming this on the exact same day as I did the part one of this video. So yes, same old, same old.
Back to another video. My name is Christina. My name is Christina.
So welcome back to another video. My name is Christina. I am a Filipino IMG, and I was born and raised in the Philippines, but I'm currently living in Austin, Texas. So if you guys followed part one of my video, I talked about how I got my USCE or US clinical experience, and basically shared my experience overall and how you can do the same through an agency. If not, if you haven't seen that yet, I'll make sure to kind of like leave a link somewhere on here so you can click on that and watch before watching this. But today I will focus more on answering a lot of the questions that you all had submitted on Instagram, because I asked you what questions you had about USCEs in general and not just, getting rotations through an agency, because I know those can be really, really expensive and pricey. But I forgot to mention in my previous video that at the end of the day, everything was so worth it. I do not regret booking my rotation through AMO. It was such a great experience. So yeah, 100% worth it. I'm just going to go through some of the questions that you all had sent in and answer them to the best of my ability. Before kind of going into the nitty-gritty of USCEs and answering your questions, I wanted to talk a little bit about, the difference between booking through an agency and getting rotations independently on your own. So it's not just through an agency that you get to pay for these rotations. There are also institutions that will want you to pay for a rotation to rotate with them. My friends, Dr. Cynthia Tan, you might already know her. She is an IMG as well, and she's currently an anesthesia resident in New Jersey. She did her electives, I believe, or did a rotation at Cornell University, but had to pay for that. So it's not just agencies that offer paid rotations. There are certain institutions that will require you to pay. So just keep that in mind as we're going through this. You are wanting to go into rotations that don't require you to pay, which is so understandable because we are all on a budget, and why not, right? Definitely join groups on Facebook that have members from your community, if that makes sense. So if you're a Filipino, join Facebook groups that have mostly Filipino physicians, and it's easier to kind of connect with attendings that way, because you just never know who is willing to help and willing to take you under their wing and will want to mentor you and let you participate in like maybe an observership program or even like a hands-on rotation with an attending. Maybe if you're from India, kind of do the same and look at groups on Facebook that have that are more closed and intimate and exclusive to, let's say, Filipinos or Indians, Indian physicians only that are here in the US. That way it would be easier to kind of reach out to them. Also, it would help to look at the program websites or different websites of institutions or hospitals, because if you go through the faculty list or list of physicians, attendings, it's easy to spot who's from your home country, right? Sometimes they'll even mention so-and-so is from the Philippines and study in so-and-so medical school, and they will usually have an email address that is linked to their name in their bio. And then that would be like a great opportunity to kind of grab and send them an email, introduce yourself, make sure you're polite as always, and then let them know, ask them if they have any projects that they need help with. Don't restrict yourself to just rotations. They might have a research project that they need assistance with, or you can also be general and say, I would love to volunteer and help you in any project that you currently need assistance with. And it's important to kind of specify that you are willing to do everything for free, because once you put yourself out there and say you're willing to like volunteer yourself and the help and assistance that you can provide, then that'll be kind of like, nice for attendings to read, and especially if they have like a lot of research projects that are ongoing. So those are kind of the tips that I wanted to throw out there before I go into like answering other questions. I got this question that asked, how did you go about the whole process of which hospital to opt for? So this is an important question. I definitely considered obviously the specialty and what I would be able to do in that institution. If it was just an observership, I would take that off my list. I focused on hospitals or institutions that offered hands-on rotations. And of course, I considered the location something that wasn't too far from where I currently am living in. It was a quick trip from Austin to Chicago, so I felt like that was a convenient trip to make. So you might have other considerations, but that was definitely the experience that I was going to get out of the rotation was definitely a top priority when selecting which institution I would end up. Purge cost. Okay, so I talked a little bit about this in my previous video. I mentioned how much it would cost for AMO specifically. I gave the range there between $1,699 to $9,600. I know that's a pretty wide range, but that's because they have a wide range of services that they offer. So when it comes to independently booking these rotations, like say directly through an institution, what I've seen so far is it ranges between $1,000 to $5,000. Now that really depends on where you're going and of course how long the rotation will take, and that doesn't even include housing or lodging. So those are some things to keep in mind. What is the best time to apply and attend the USCEs? I am a second-year medical student from India. So ideally, you would want to actively participate in USCEs closer to the time that you match. Again, I could be wrong in this, but it's important for programs to see rotations that are closer to when you apply to match. If anyone wants to correct me, please write down the correct answer to this in the comments below. Should I ask for an observership, internship, or clinical rotation? What's the proper term? So it really depends on what you're looking for. If you want to be at the clinical or hospital setup, like what I did, I wanted and was looking for a hands-on clinical rotation. So usually if you're booking through an agency, they will have options or the kind of rotations that you will be allowed to do. If you are directly emailing or contacting an attending or an institution, they have observership opportunities available. Electives are more for medical students. So as somebody who has already graduated medical school, ask them if they have any, just be general if you want, ask them if they have any observership opportunities or opportunities to rotate with an attending when you're reaching out to these institutions. Does your rotation require you to wear a white blazer? So in my case, yes, we were required to wear a white blazer, and our rotation required us to wear business casual. One thing I forgot to mention in my previous video is that it's important to show up to the clinic or the hospital properly dressed or dressed up decently, because remember that you are the physician or the medical doctor or the student doctor, and you are presenting yourself to your patient. And I always think that the way you look when you're presenting yourself to your patient is a reflection of the kind of doctor you are. I'm not saying you have to be completely glammed up when you show up, but you also don't want to show up with your hair messy and your coat's not ironed and your shirt is untidy, and it's not the way you want your patients to remember you, right? So basic hygiene practice is to basically just make sure you show up looking presentable and that you smell good and you look nice. Is there a hands-on USCE that is free? So actually, I do know of an opportunity that I wanted to talk more about in a separate video, but I will leave the information, the Instagram handle in the description box below. This is a rotation in Hawaii with Dr. Sonido. So he is a Filipino physician and he runs a clinic in Hawaii, and they don't ask rotators to pay for this rotation, which is incredible. Plus, it's kind of like a mini vacation because you get to live in Hawaii for however many weeks, and they don't just restrict the rotation to Filipinos. They welcome everybody from around the world. The only thing you will have to worry about is lodging. So if that's something you're interested in, I will leave the Instagram handle below, and feel free to reach out to their staff. This is an interesting question. How to choose an elective in a specialty while I don't know what specialty I will apply to in the future? Okay, that's tricky, but I will say the bulk of the patients are usually found in specialties like family medicine and internal medicine. So if you are not sure which specialty you want to apply to for the electives, definitely look at family medicine and internal medicine. Family medicine has a wide array or variety of procedures that they get exposed to. They're not just talking to patients, they get to do procedures in the ER, they get to suture, and are very hands-on with their patients. So definitely look into that if you are unsure about what specialty you're thinking about. And that's okay. If you're not sure, that's totally fine. Everybody kind of figures this out, late in the game. Some are early, but it really is okay if you're not sure. Where can I apply for USCEs during COVID time? So again, this is a tricky because COVID has really brought up a lot of restrictions, especially for for IMGs in general. So if you reach out to several attendings and institutions, a lot of them will say, as I mentioned in the previous video, that they will definitely want to prioritize their medical students over externs or people who want to observe from outside the country. But then if you reach out to attendings directly, like I mentioned earlier, if you are in a group on Facebook or know a small intimate community that can connect you directly to an attending, even in a private clinic, they seem to be more open to allowing people to rotate with them or do an observership with them. So don't lose hope. Please try and exhaust all efforts to kind of look for opportunities to rotate and whatnot. I definitely made sure to exhaust all my options before I decided finally to go through with AMO's rotation. So our USCEs at private clinics that we get through ACE-MD or AMO or USMLE Start hold value? Do they hold value? So I know a lot of IMGs who have matched from getting LORs at private clinics. I think what matters the most, of course, when you have a letterhead from a big institution and whatnot that's well known, I'm sure it'll be easier or faster to kind of for program directors to notice. But I think, in my opinion, and based on the interviews that I've done with fellow IMGs, what seems to hold more value or the most value is the quality of the LOR. What the attending says about you highlights your skills during the rotation, and not just, submitting a generic letter. So I think it's important that the LOR that you're attending writes for you is detailed, it's tailored to you specifically, and that just goes to show that it wasn't just something that was kind of like copied from the internet or, just written for the sake of writing an LOR. So that's my opinion on it, and feel free to ask other people for their opinion, but I really feel since not everyone realistically is able to rotate in Ivy League schools or institutions, or with the most well-known physician here in the US. There have been a lot of questions asking about whether or not it was okay to get an observership versus an elective or clinical rotation. The way I see it is honestly 100% okay, because at the end of the day, you're still learning from that experience, and you may not be getting hands-on experience or getting to kind of interview the patients yourselves and things like that. But for rotations like surgery, for example, you're doing mostly observerships for that in particular. And you can honestly learn a lot. You're not just going to be kind of stagnant during those rotations. A lot of the times, the attending will ask you questions like, what specific blood vessel are they pointing to? Or what do you need to avoid in order to avoid like hemorrhage in a patient? So you're still actively learning even when you're doing an observership. And I'm saying this because I myself have, participated in an observership before, and I still learned a lot. You can learn a lot from just watching and observing what your attending is doing. And again, as I said earlier, at the end of the day, it's about the quality of the LOR that you are able to get at the end of your rotation. And realistically, not everyone is able to get hands-on rotations, especially as an IMG. A lot of IMGs are only able to get observerships. So don't worry if you're not able to get hands-on rotations, especially now during COVID. This is a really good question. I am a graduate. For USCEs, do I apply to hospitals like clerkship or call or mail doctors and requests? Please mention how to get hands-on after graduation, as it is really hard to get one after one graduates. This is so true because I found myself having a very difficult time finding rotations as a medical graduate, because one of the reasons why medical students are able to kind of arrange rotations with other institutions in different countries a lot easier is because students have an affiliation to a certain institution, and institutions that you will rotate at will need this for, let's say, malpractice or any issues that come up. The medical student has an institution that can back them up or support them. So if you're coming in as an individual who has already graduated medical school, you are not affiliated with any institution whatsoever. No one can back you up. You usually don't have insurance, and if any malpractice issues, happen, knock on wood, you might get dragged into that, and it'll just become this huge mess. And so as somebody who already graduated medical school, one of the options, again, like I said, is through an agency, Or you can kind of just like send hundreds and hundreds of emails. And I don't exaggerate when I say send hundreds of emails, because a lot of the time you will not get a response. You will get a response that says no, or you can get a response that will say, we're not accepting right now during COVID because XYZ, or because it's COVID and it's difficult for you to get a spot or a slot. So just because you're a graduate, it doesn't mean you are completely unable to get clinical experience, US clinical experience. I am one of those people who have already graduated medical school and was able to get hands-on clinical experience. It may be expensive, but think about it this way. It is a great investment. And when you are emailing or getting in touch with institutions or attendings directly, make sure you introduce yourself. And at the same time, it really helps if you make your email as brief and concise as possible, because remember, these people are extremely busy and they're probably reading hundreds of emails a day. And might not even have time to go through any of them. So attach your CV, express your interests. Let's say you want to go into family medicine, kind of say what particular or specific interests you have in family medicine, and ask them if they have a program or are able to allow you to rotate with them. So don't be frustrated or don't be upset if you don't get a response. And if you get a response that says no, you just move on to the next one. That's just the way it works. I like this question, how to be assertive or assertive without being babida or babibo. How to make a good impression. Definitely be that person who is a team player. I know this gets brought up so many times, especially here in America, but you don't want to be that person that easily wants to kind of outshine your group mates for the sake of just standing out, if that makes any sense. In my previous video, part 1 of this series, I talked about how I kind of stood out during my rotation, and a lot of that was me asking questions that were sensible. You know, you don't want to ask questions that are kind of silly. You definitely want to sound interested, and you want to ask if your attending needs anything. And honestly, don't be ashamed or afraid to even ask your group mates questions, because then they will know that you are also willing to learn from them, and that you're there to kind of communicate with them as well, and not just kind of like hang around each other. Ask the nurses questions. Don't be afraid. They've been there for longer than maybe the attendings have even, and they're the group of people who have been exposed to all of these cases on a daily basis 24/7. So they know so much more than a lot of us at the hospital. So don't be afraid to kind of ask those questions. I don't really believe in being too pabibo or pabida, because I think you really need to have a certain level of energy and a certain level of interest to show that you really are somebody who wants to be there, not just for the sake of like getting an LOR at the end of the day. One thing my attending shared with me is that he immediately noticed students who were just there to pass the time. So attendings notice these things, and if they just see that you're kind of just hanging around, you're looking at your phone. I never ever looked at my phone, not one single moment when I was in the around patients or around my attending. If it was to contact a group mate, I would tell my attending, I'm just going to contact my group mate to let them know that we are in this ward or this floor. But that was it. I never looked at my phone. I was very much focused on what was happening in front of me, and that way I wouldn't be so distracted, and was also attentive to what my attending was saying he might need. So it was easier for me to follow through and follow up, ask my attending questions, ask the patient questions, because I was very much present. So that's definitely how you can kind of make a good impression, I feel. How to be ready for it, I think, and what needs to be read. So I think it's important to know the basics, because attendings will know that you are there to learn. But it's important to actually come in and know how to take a standard history and to do a standard physical examination. Knowing the structure of how a basic history is runs or goes or is formed is very, very important when you're rotating. And I think once you're able to kind of master how to take a good history, your attending will definitely notice. Kind of ask your attending, because everybody seems to be different with regards to how the history is arranged. So on your first day, you'll notice, you know, how your attending gets the history of the patient, and it's important to know to follow and be organized when you're asking these questions so as not to confuse the patient. So that's what I think would be like a great way to kind of prepare for the rotation. And then on your first day, you're able to gauge what cases you're going to be encountering for the rest of the rotation. So read up on those cases. That way you can, the next day, ask your attending questions that you need clarifications on. Another question is, your level of English or listening skills has been a challenge for you. I have never felt more comfortable talking to patients than I ever have. And that's why I don't regret doing a Step 2 CS, because it was such a great experience for me to see or gauge what I lacked and what I needed to work on when talking to patients here in America. Because obviously it's very different the way I would interact with patients in the Philippines and the way I would interact with patients here in America. So Step 2 CS was a great experience for me, and a great way to kind of see and know the flow of what it was like to talk to patients here in America. I did not have a hard time listening or speaking here in America when it came to like my patients in general. I know this can be an issue sometimes for IMGs especially. It sounds silly, but it would help to kind of familiarize yourselves with pop culture here in the States, like listening to podcasts, even watching YouTube videos, movies, listening to music. You have to start somewhere. Okay, a full list of agency names that is not problematic. So I can only speak for AMOpportunities because I've had personal experience with it. And like I mentioned earlier in this video, or I think it was part 1 of this video, Sarang Choi was able to talk about her experience with Brooklyn USCEs, and she has a video about that as well. I don't know about the other agencies, although I will name some from which I know people who have rotated there. FMG Portal is one, and MD2B is another one. So those are agencies that you can definitely kind of look up and do your research on. Whoa. Your thoughts on virtual USCEs. So I think virtual USCEs are kind of awkward. I've never done it, but just thinking about, the flow of virtual USCEs and how that's going to be, and just imagining what it feels like is a little strange. But again, I can't say for sure because I've never done virtual USCEs, but I will say that the only virtual rotation or opportunity I think would be great is a research opportunity that you can do virtually. You're not able to transport yourself obviously to that institution and do like research in person, but I think doing research virtually is so much better than doing a rotation virtually, if that makes any sense. I got a lot of questions about what resources can help us prepare for rotation. So I did mention that it's important for you to kind of figure out, of course, decide which specialty you're going to be rotating in. Reach out to somebody on social media or someone you know who's a resident here in that specialty and ask them what books they're reading, or ask them what kind of cases they're exposed to on a daily basis. Ask them what apps they're using on their phones to kind of do like quick referencing whenever they're at the hospital. So that's what I would do, and that's what I did. Are you allowed to touch patients during an observership, or you just round with the doctors and observe? So speaking from my experience doing observerships a couple years ago, I was not allowed to interview the patients at all. It's not allowed to do physical examinations. You're there to just purely observe, and that's the main difference between a hands-on rotation and an observership. And one of the reasons why I really wanted this rotation in Chicago, because it was hands-on. How many months before you start organizing a USCE, contacting the hospital and stuff? So through the agency, like I mentioned in the previous video, ideally you would want to do 4 to 6 months preparation before your actual start date. In my case, it was 2 months prior because I already had a lot of the documents that were ready and I'm already here in the US, so it wasn't that difficult for me to arrange for that. But if you're contacting the hospital directly, it really depends. So you can only find out once you establish that connection with that hospital and you're able to kind of find out how often they offer this rotation and when the availability of the attending is. Then they'll be able to tell you, you need all of these documents and you need it to be ready by, let's just say, October. So that's the only time you'll be able to kind of gauge how long it would take for you to get everything ready. Oh, this one's a good one. Hi, are you finding it harder to study with rotation? So I also had another message in my Instagram DMs that asked me how helpful is doing a rotation with Step 1 studying. So I will let you guys know that the mindset I had before going into this rotation was to focus mainly on the rotation. But because I wanted to make sure I wasn't bombarding myself with too many things to do, and wanted to make sure my headspace was clear and that I was able to absorb all of the information without anything else kind of like affecting my mental health. So I did tell myself that, but I found some time, especially during the weekend, since I kind of just like stayed in, would go through question blocks. And the wonderful thing about doing rotations versus just like purely studying is the information that you're reading just makes so much more sense. I have talked about this multiple times on my Instagram, and I said that watching the symptoms kind of unfold before your eyes and looking at labs in person and seeing how it affects the health of your patient it just makes so much more sense. And I think what really helped with doing the rotation was the pharmacology of it all, because we could actually see what medications were given to each patient and how it was affecting them, the side effects that they were experiencing, how long they were going to have to take it for, the dosages were all there. So definitely helped me a lot get a better understanding and grasp of what I was dealing with. And I say this not, I say this as somebody who wanted to kind of get familiar with pharmacology and the medications that are used here in the US, especially since pharmacology is like a huge Waterloo of mine. So I was very intimidated, and I was thinking, I'm never going to learn this because I don't understand anything. It's so different from what the medications I'm used to seeing in the Philippines. But once I saw that on the EMR, giving it to our patients, it just made so much more sense. And it made vignettes and cases kind of easier to understand. And when we saw certain patients with a specific case that stood out, it was easy to tell myself, I'm never going to forget this because now I've actually seen it in person. So it definitely helped with studying for step 1. And it was great to kind of just let my mind and my brain kind of breathe from all of that information overload. So if you can squeeze in studying for step 1 or other steps during rotations, well and good. Like I said, I decided for myself that I was just going to go through questions without being too hard on myself, if that makes any sense. So I took it lightly, but also just realize that, okay, even if I got this question wrong, at least I can kind of remember it better next time and think about what I saw in the hospital. So that's how I approached it this time around. These are all the questions, or at least the bulk of the questions that I had. A lot of them were kind of repeated questions, so I kind of lumped them in together and answered them as best as I could. I'm sorry if I kind of wasn't able to answer a lot of the questions the way you wanted me to, but if there are other questions that you all have in mind, please feel free to leave a comment down below and I'll try to get back to you. So going to let you guys know that I do have a discount code in case you are interested to rotate under AMOpportunities. It was not sponsored by AMO. I paid for the rotation myself, and they did not ask me to make this video or anything like that. I did this on my own free will. So if you want to get $100 off any rotation that AMO has to offer, you can use my discount code. I will also leave it in the link below. And any other information like that rotation that does not require you to pay for anything in Hawaii is with Dr. Sunido's clinic. So I will leave the Instagram below as well. So I hope you guys enjoyed part 2 of this video. I really appreciate you guys taking the time to kind of like listen to me, and I hope what I shared today was helpful to Filipinos, my fellow Filipinos who are watching this video. Maraming salamat po sa panonood ng video na ito, at kita-kita ulit tayo sa susunod na video. So thank you again so much. I hope you guys are safe and well, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!